Freedom and Feathers TikTok series, episode 1. We're just gonna dive right onto it. Various types of bows you'll see in archery. If you followed me for a while, you know that I lean towards using a recurve bow. That said, my next runner-up would be a longbow. There are different styles though. So aside from a recurve, which we'll get into because there's different types of recurves. I never said this was gonna be an easy course. Different types of recurve bows. There's longbows, there's also compounds, and there's crossbows. So with that, let's just dive into the types of recurve bows. Fundamentals. Takedown recurve bow, one-piece recurve bow. This is the Karen by Three Rivers Archery. This is the Bear Grizzly by Bear Archery. Different dynamics, different styles, awesome bows. We'll get into actually bow gear recommendations in the later videos. Just because I have a bow does not mean I recommend it, for the record. I'm gonna repeat, just because I own a bow does not mean I recommend it. When I recommend a bow, I will tell you. And I highly recommend the Karen by Three Rivers Archery. Highly recommend the Bear Grizzly by Bear. Done and done. We'll get into more later on. But takedown recurve bow, what that means, it means the limbs can be removed. For purposes of demonstration, I'll show y'all here. The limbs can be unscrewed and removed so you can interchange the limbs. And why that's a great thing is because you can actually grow with your bow. So, for example, I always recommend folks start with a lower poundage draw weight. And for takedown recurve bows, that just means that once you have the bow, you can buy the next up level, draw weight if you will, and just put the new limbs on. You don't have to buy a whole new bow because just the limbs are cheaper than the whole bow. So takedown recurve bows are great in my book just because it gives you that flexibility, and it also is easier for travel if you're going to the range or if you're flying with them or even driving with them. You don't have to worry about them breaking. So next up, one-piece bows. And for those of you who followed me for a while, you know that this is actually my second Bear Grizzly. I've kept my first one. She broke. And this was all use your arrow. And like I said, we have updated our garage to have more temp regulations. So it's not like it used to be back when this poor baby was out here and it was bad things. So with that, one-piece recurve bow, no takedown limbs, you get what you get. You can't change the draw weight or anything like that. For this specific bow, as you can see here, it's 58 inches. Maybe you can see. Which I think makes a great flexible bow when you're out hunting, or for me in my case, if I'm flipping from distance to up close trick shots, because one of the reasons why I do defer to recurve bows versus longbows is I have a knack for switching everything up. So I'll be out, at my 30-yard mark, 25-yard mark, and then I'll be like, I feel like shooting a dime out of the air. I'll go up close. So instead of having to change, from a longbow, for example, to a recurve bow, I just have my recurve bow. And the Bear Grizzly is one of my favorites because it's just so light. So we got takedown recurve bows, we got one-piece recurve bows, and Olympic recurve bows. Then we have the shoot off the hand, old school, Mongolian or Korean style bows. And these bows, as you can see, they do not have a shelf. What does that mean, Jen? There's no place for the arrow to sit on as you draw back and release. There is. It's your hand. You shoot off your hand for these style of bows versus shooting off the shelf, which you find on most recurve traditional archery bows. So that covers the spectrum of recurve bows. The next we'll jump into is longbows. So this is the Tomahawk Kiska from Three Rivers Archery. I love her. She's amazing. One thing you're gonna note right off the bat is that it's taller in terms of the height. And there's another one up there, I'm not sure if you can see it that one is a 68-inch longbow. The way you can distinguish between a longbow and a recurve is taking a look at the limbs. Recurves will curve. One thing to note for longbows is I love my longbows, but I won't ever really do up close shots with them just because the grip is a bit different and the shelf is typically smaller. So yeah, longbows. Recurves, longbows. Next up, compounds. Yes, I know I shoot all the recurves and longbows and you never see me with a compound. I do own them, I own 2. My husband actually owns one in there as well. But just because I don't show my videos doesn't mean I don't shoot it. I love my compound, but I enjoy the challenge and the mental game that comes along with traditional archery. Because at the end of the day, I picked up archery because I wanted a hobby. I wanted something that would push me to my limits, that would make me challenge myself, that would be as frustrating as it would be rewarding. And for me, recurve bows, traditional style, it's perfection. With that, I do own some compounds, and this is my compound bow by Diamond Archery. I love her. She's great. I got her, I think, maybe, I don't know, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I got my first compound maybe about 6 years ago, give or take. Anyway, one of the ways you can distinguish between a recurve bow, longbow, and compound is compounds, they're more tech savvy. There's string suppression systems, there's cables, there's stabilizers, there's also, you know, peeps, knocking loop, cams, quiver you can mount to it. There's various styles of the arrow rest, but I have the whiskers on mine. At the end of the day, compounds are very technically savvy, and recurves, longbows, excluding Olympic archery, there are additional components added to Olympic style recurve bows, from stabilizers and weights to sights. It's great bows, just different style. Stick and string, recurve and longbows, compounds, tech savvy for the avid hunter, powerhouse. Distance, you can get massive distance, major power with compounds. Another huge factor to consider is when you're drawing back a compound, you're using this style of release. You're not using your fingers. This differs from recurves and longbows where you're typically using gloves or tabs. You're clipping into the loop, you're pulling back, looking through the peep, using your sights. That said, when you draw back, all of the power, all the weight is going to be in that draw. Once you get to your anchor point, you don't have to hold it. So, for example, this is I think a 50. If I were to draw it right now, I would be pulling back 50, but once I get to my anchor point, it would hold it for me. The weight would be in the actual bow itself. Versus a recurve bow, when you're drawing back on a recurve or a longbow, for that nature, you are holding the entire 50 pounds of that string from the moment that you pick up the bow and draw back, holding your anchor point until you release. There's no relief from holding that poundage of weight. The catch-22 is, of course, for the compound, is that the bows are usually much heavier. So you might not have to hold the weight back, but you're having to hold it forward. So yeah. So last, but certainly not least, is the crossbow. Just for the record, any arrow used for all these bows, they're called arrows. If you're using a crossbow, you're not shooting an arrow, you're shooting a bolt. I do not own a crossbow, well, except for this one, and I love it. That said, I've shot them before and they're a blast. It's really, as you can see here, it's really just like a cross between a gun and a bow. You have the bow aspect, you have the gun aspect, you have a trigger, a lever. In short, crossbows are bows mounted on top of rifle stock. You can do compound style with cables and cams, or you can have a recurve bow mounted on top, just like you see here. Am I allowed to say gun on TikTok? Anyway, but yeah, so those are the various types of bows and styles and subtiles. Hope this helped y'all. We're now gonna dive into types of quivers.